Welcome to this new lecture related to the cardiovascular system. And also we're going to study some basic principles of electrocardiography or ECG. Before we start, let me introduce some basic concepts. For instance, the word cardiovascular. Cardio refers to the heart, which is the main character of this lecture, while vascular refers to the blood vessels in the body, such as the veins and the arteries. Veins carry blood towards the heart, while arteries carry blood away from the heart. So the heart is essentially a muscle that contracts and pumps blood. How do you call this muscle? Well, during the whole lecture, I'm going to use the word myocardium, which refers to the muscular tissue of the heart. Now, the whole process will start at the right side of the heart. The oxygenated blood goes inside via the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and then blood enters to the right atrium, which is located here. Then blood passes through the tricuspid valve, located here, and then the blood enters to the right ventricle. And from the right ventricle, the blood then goes outside of the heart, passing through the pulmonary valve. Then the blood passes by these two vessels called the pulmonary arteries. Then blood goes to the lungs. When the blood enters to the lungs, gas exchange occurs. The blood then returns back to the heart and goes to the left atrium through the pulmonary veins located here. These are the pulmonary veins. And blood entering the pulmonary veins are now oxygenated. From the left atrium, blood goes to the left ventricle, passing through the bicuspid valve. Once the blood enters the left ventricle, it goes now through this structure called the aortic valve. And finally, blood goes to the aorta. From the aorta, the blood leaves the heart and then circulation takes place now. So what causes the heart to pump blood? Well, the answer is electrical activity. Contraction is initiated by electrical impulses, known as action potentials. The heart generates its own electrical stimulation. In fact, a heart can keep on beating even when taken out of the body. The nervous system, controlled by the brain, remember from previous lecture, we saw the brain activity. This nervous system can make the heart beats go faster or slower, but cannot generate them. So the normal cardiac cycle begins with spontaneous depolarization of the sinoatrial node located here, an area of specialized tissue situated in the right atrium near the superior vena cava. This is the natural pacemaker of the heart and initiates all heartbeat and determines heart rate. Electrical impulses from the SA node spread throughout both atria and stimulate them to contract. Now, the atrioventricular node or AV node, located on the other side of the right atrium, serves as electrical gateways to the ventricles. It delays the passing of electrical impulses to the ventricles. This delay is to ensure that the atria has ejected all the blood into the ventricles before the ventricles contract. The AV node receives signals from the SA node and passes them onto the atrioventricular bundle or bundle of His. This bundle is then divided into right and left bundle branches, which conduct the impulses of the rest of the chambers. The signals are then passed on to the Purkinje fibers, turning upward and spreading through the ventricular myocardium. So the electrical activities of the heart can be recorded in a form of an electrocardiogram ECG. An ECG is composed of the recording of all the action potentials produced by the nodes. Each wave or segment of the ECG corresponds to certain events of the cardiac electrical cycle. So when the atria are full of blood, the SA node fires electrical signals spread through all the atria and then causes to depolarize. This is represented by the P wave on the ECG. Then we have QRS complex, and then we have the T wave. The Q segments represents the time the signals travel from the SA node to the AV node. Here, the two atria are contracting. Let's say the left atrium and the right atrium are contracting. Okay? During this phase. The QRS complex marks the firing of the AV node. So the AV node is very important here and represents ventricular depolarization. I'm going to refer to depolarization with letter D, known as contraction of the muscles, and repolarization with letter R is going to be referred as relaxation of these muscles. Okay, so the QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization. Let's say the ventricles, the left ventricle and the right ventricle are now contracted. Okay, are contracting now during the QRS wave. R wave, well, first of all, Q wave corresponds to depolarization of the ventricular septum, the wall between the left and the right ventricles. R wave is produced by the depolarization of the main mass of the ventricles. And finally, S wave represents the last phase of ventricular depolarization. Atrial repolarization, remember, relaxing state, also occurs during this time, during the S wave. So here, the atria, the left atria and the right atria are now relaxing. Oops. Sorry. Are relaxing. Okay, relaxing. Okay, so now let me describe the ST segment. The ST segment here. Okay, the ST segment reflects when the ventricles pump blood. So let's say that here during this time, left ventricle and right ventricle pumps blood. Here, pumps blood. Okay, during this segment. And T wave represents ventricular repolarization. Let's say the ventricles are now relaxed. So left ventricle and right ventricles now are relaxing. Okay? So the cycle repeats itself with every heartbeat. The SA node sets the rate and the rhythm. At rest, a normal heart beats around, let's say, 60 to 100 per minute. So 60 to 100 beats per minute in a normal adult state. Exercise and motions, fevers, and some medications can cause your heart to beat faster, sometimes well over 100 beats per minute. So, how do you know how fast your heart is beating? Well, now it's time to get your heart rate. Okay, please do this. You will need a watch with a second hand, okay? So place your index and middle finger, okay, here the index and the middle finger of your hand on the inner wrist of the other arm here, just below the base of the thumb. Count the number of taps you feel in 10 seconds, okay? Number of taps in 10 seconds, during 10 seconds. Multiply the number of taps now by 6. Multiply by 6. Why? Because you will find your heart rate for 1 minute. So if, for instance, if you count 6 taps during 10 seconds, multiplied by 6, well, in that case, you have a lower rate. So be careful with that. This is the normal way to get your heart rate with your hands and a watch. Now, how do I begin to read an ECG or an electrocardiogram? Well, doctors uses paper, and this paper is at speed of 25 millimeters per second. It has a lot of squares of these sizes. Let's say, for instance, this is a square divided by all small squares located here, and each small square measures 1 millimeter, and 1 millimeter represents 0.04 seconds, okay? So one large square, let's say 5 millimeters, represents 0.2 seconds during the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, each small square represents 0.1 millivolts, and the whole square on the vertical axis represents 0.5 millivolts. Okay, so the measurement of important ECG intervals usually includes the PR interval, which is located here. I already described this. The QRS interval, which is located here, and the QT interval. So the QT interval also, doctors measure this. So PR interval, for instance, in these, let me erase these notes here. Okay, so, okay, now, with another color because the paper is, okay, is red. Okay, so the PR interval, let's count the number of small squares. Let's say that 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 squares, okay? It measures 4 squares, 4 millimeters, which represents a PR interval of 0.16 seconds. So the normal PR interval is less than 0.2 seconds. So this state is okay. So the normal beats are less than 0.2 seconds. Okay, this will be the normal state of a PR interval. Now, the QRS interval, let's say this could be 1, 2 squares, okay? So, okay, well, I'm going to use this. So the QR interval measures 2 small squares, which represents 0.08 seconds, okay, the QRS. And the normal QRS interval is less than 0.12 seconds, okay? So this would be a normal state of a QRS interval. Now, the QT interval measures, let's say, small squares. How many squares? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 squares for the small squares, 9 millimeters. And this represents, let's say, 9 squares multiplied by 0.04. It equals 0.36 seconds. And how do I measure, or how to identify the QT interval? How could be normal or not? Well, QT is rate dependent. So the QT, in this case, the corrected QT equals, let's say, it's just a rate. So the observed QT interval divided by the square root of the length of from the R to another R. Okay, so the interval from R to R. So in this case, well, in general, the QT interval is normal when it's less than half of the RR interval, R to R interval. Okay, so these definitions, you will consider them if you want to see how normal is your heart rate. Okay, so now let me introduce how to place electrodes or lead configuration during the in ECG. Okay, so ECG, as I told you before, is a recording of the variations in voltage that are produced by depolarization and repolarization of the muscles of the heart. Remember the myocardium. So the variations in voltage are measured at the surface of the body using surface electrodes. ECG has 12 leads or electrodes in this case, but we're going to analyze all of them by little steps. For instance, we have a varied combination of leads and chest leads taken together and provide a three-dimensional view into the electrical activity and workings of the heart. So, for instance, we have some basic configurations. The first configuration is called lead 1 or toward left. I'm going to use these 4 electrodes here, located here, and I'm going to say that on your right leg is just a neutral or ground. Okay, so you're going to measure the potential difference between the negative lead or electrode and the positive electrode with respect to ground. Okay, so this is lead 1 configuration. Lead 2, called toward left foot, we have the same number of electrodes, but now we're going to measure the right arm lead, which is the negative side, and we're going to determine the potential difference between the negative and the positive connected to the left leg lead, okay, with respect to ground. This could be lead 2 configuration. Lead 3 now is down and rightward. In this case, for instance, now we're going to measure the potential difference between the left arm lead and the left leg lead. So this could be the lead 3 configuration. And also we have 3 different configurations. In this case, in this lecture, I'm going to use the ABR augmented leads example, for instance. How to measure this? Well, you need to measure both, let's say this could be negative, okay, both electrodes, and with respect, of course, to ground, but you're going to measure the potential difference between these leads and the positive lead here. These are the augmented leads example. So this is called the ABR, or the augmented lead. But of course, we also have ABL and ABF. So how many electrodes do we have? Well, we have like here four different electrodes. We have also three different combinations, and then also we have a lot of electrodes located at the chest. We have here a chest leads called B1, B2, B3 to B6. These leads are unipolar. It means that you're going to measure the potential difference between V1 and ground, B2 and ground, and so on. So the complete 12 lead ECG, this is an example of the complete 12 lead ECG. You need to record each of the lead configurations. For instance, lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, ABR, ABL, ABF, and the whole electrodes connected to the chest. So I'm going to upload an ECG reading, but in that case, I'm gonna upload to Blackware only the recording of lead 2 configuration. So you need to measure all the intervals that I already described. So now, thank you, and let's have some code.